Dixie, it said in the thing and the notice that it was $100 cash, but here it says 2 Barnacle cards.
Each $100.
Okay, one of them, I mean, the thing I got said cash, just so you know.
Jody, do you want us on screen when we start? Or not until you introduce us?
I think just go ahead and be on. If you want.
It stopped storming last night. It was blowing so hard here, and I was like, "Oh, please don't storm."
Okay, you guys, we're going live now. So Jody, stand by, okay?
Okay.
Welcome everybody to Sealaska's virtual Q3 board Q&A. I'd like to kick us off and welcome our Sealaska Vice Chair, Jody Mitchell. Jody.
Hi there. Thank you for joining Sealaska for our virtual update on policy efforts. The Sealaska board has committed to hosting quarterly Q&A sessions. And so this is the third quarter one, or no, maybe it's a second, I'm not sure. My name is Jody Mitchell, and I serve as the Sealaska Vice Chair. I also have been elected to serve as the chair for the Audit Committee. And just so you know who I am, my Tlingit name is Seithtin. I am Daishitan from the Raven House of Angoon. My family are the John family. Ronald and Elsie John were my grandparents. And my father is Dennis Ames, formerly of Angoon and also of Sitka and also of Hawaii and now of Colorado. And my mother was the late Eleanor John David. Before we get going, I'd like to pause and recognize the traditional lands of Southeast and Juneau, where Sealaska is headquartered. Gunas Cheese to the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people, the original owners of Southeast Alaska. Sealaska is headquartered in Zontekahini, also known as Juneau. Juneau is the traditional homeland of the Taku Kwan and the Akwan. So we just want to thank those two clans for allowing us to be on their land. I'm joining today Zoom from Zontekahini. And a little about what's going on with me. Oh, sorry, my dogs. I just became a new grandma. My very first grandchild was born on July 18th, about 3 weeks early. And he is just very, very precious. His name is Paxton Price Fuller, and I couldn't be prouder. And so next I will ask the directors joining us today to introduce themselves. And so let's start with Kyle Juice.
Oh, how Nana. I'm so happy for you. Kailjus Hinu di Kiang. My name is Kailjus Hikta Handlai Sluth Ijing. I come from and I live in the village of Heidelberg on Prince of Wales Island. I'm Yuk Janas. I'm a woman of the Yuklanas clan, the Raven double-fin killer whale. And I am really hoping to come across today with my co-directors as those who want to share with you information today about what we're doing. But getting back, my family, I need to acknowledge my father is from Metlakatla. His name was Osh Lang. And my grandmother on my dad's side was Cora Booth Lang. My grandfather was Elmer Booth. On my mother's side, Cagni Wadu Ed Sanderson was my grandfather. He was a Karuk from Northern California. And my grandmother was Kailjus Wadu Helen Sanderson. And right now, I want to say congratulations, Jody. There's nothing better than the Nana Club. My granddaughter's visiting right now, so it's just an amazing time. So, yeah. So yeah, good news, Jode. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, goodness, geez, Kyle Juice. Before we get to the agenda, Kyle Juice, it's been a couple months since the annual meeting. What have you been up to?
Well, a lot. I was recently reelected at that annual meeting, and so I'm honored to serve as the beginning of my second term. I serve as compensation chair on the board of directors, but otherwise we flew into the Hawaiians. We had an island-wide greeting and send off. We were so busy, and it was so amazing to be a part of that. It was a lot of work, community work, that I thank the community of Heidelberg. I just had some really great news. We had a 50th wedding anniversary here for Luella and Sensen Peel, and congratulations to them. That's a milestone. We had a naming party for the Yuklanas, our new babies. We gave them names. And, you know, if I'm like any of you, been busy harvesting, put up some halibut this week, my kids are in town. It's the happiest time of the year for me. So it's been busy, but I'm sure like the rest of you, we're out getting what we can get for the winter, and just exciting times. But thank you for asking, Jode. That's so thoughtful of you. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing. Yep, it's a busy time for all of us with berry picking and catching fish. And yep, I'm getting ready to load my smokehouse myself, and looking forward to when my grandson is old enough to teach and help me. He lives just down the street, very convenient. He's my eldest daughter, Deanne's son. So anyway, enough about me. I keep going, you know, grandmotherhood is all consuming, and my heart is so full of joy. So let's come on to the next speaker, Barbara Cadiente Nelson. Barbara, can you introduce yourself and go ahead and introduce yourself?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. Many apologies. My system just shut down. It's too hot for my iPad. It said emergency, emergency, shut it down. So I did. So I called in. I hope to fix that as we continue. This is Barbara Cadiente Nelson, Eshkokak Yanasach from Kutsnu Kwan and Gun Kwan. I'm Tekwedi Brown Bear. My mother is Irene Hunter Cadiente. Her Tlingit name is Jigekla Ka Junakla. I'm CNAD Ilocano Yedi. My father's Andres Cadiente Sr., and the name given him by Dr. Walter Sowoloff is Taka, my great grandfather's name. I'm married to Norval Nelson, who's a Nungan, otherwise known as an Aleut, and Dog Salmon. We have 4 grown children, and I think the last time I counted 17 grandchildren and great grandchildren. But we have Noreen, Norval, Nicholas, and Nemasia, our 4 grown children. I'm currently the vice president of the Star of the Sea Incorporated, my family's commercial fishing vessel, and I serve you as the chair of Shareholder Relations Committee. I also am seated on the Douglas Indian Association Tribal Council and also the search board rep for DIA. And that's who I am, and that's what I'm about.
Well, thank you, Barbara. And just while we're thinking about it, what have you been up to this summer?
Oh, thank you for asking. I'm on the land of the Muckleshoot Coast Salish tribe for right now. I'm visiting. I should be out commercial fishing with Norby, but I came down to celebrate our youngest daughter Asia's 7th rebirth day, 7 years remission, and also my older daughter Noreen drove cross country from Florida to move back. And so we all converged with her daughter, my granddaughter Mikkel, and her babies. And so my sister came down for the festivities, and our great grandchildren were given their brown bear names. And we've been doing touristy things, but I brought some salmon down, boiled fish as requested by my granddaughter. And we've just been having a real good healing time and a grateful time. So thanks for asking.
Oh, wow, you have been busy. Well, congratulations to Asia.
Thank
And
you.
I'm glad Noreen is moving back home, and it sounds like you've been very busy. But let's move on. And the next speaker, or the final one of us, of the 4 of us, is Director Hollingstad. So Nicole, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jody. Hi, shareholders. It's always so wonderful to see you. Chakra yuchat yugasak, ye chayahat, taktin harnat hatseti, sakwedi, and Norwegian yadi ayachat. My Tlingit name is Chakla. My English name is Nicole Hollingstad, and I'm very proudly born and raised in Petersburg, Alaska. I'm the child of Norwegian and Sakwedi, and it's always such a thrill to be in a forum to exchange information with our shareholders about so many great things that are happening at Sea Alaska. I know sometimes it's hard to always sort of know what channels you have available to you. So these sort of lunch and learn Q&A sessions always get me very, very excited to listen to questions, answer questions, provide information. So very happy to be here. I'm zooming into you from Anchorage, the land of the Dinaaina, where I lead my consulting business, and we specialize in assisting companies, particularly by infusing their operations with our native values. So it's what I love to do.
Awesome. I know how organized you are, so I'm sure that you're very successful at that. So thank you, Nicole. And just also just want to know what you've been up to this summer or since our annual meeting.
Well, for any of our shareholders who are listening from Anchorage, you probably can sympathize. I've been trying to squeeze a summer out of the approximately 6 days that we've had without rain so far. So it's been more of a southeast summer, I think, up here, but that doesn't stop us from getting out, staying connected to the land. Because of the weather, I'm actually focusing a little bit more on my beadwork. And earlier this year, Director Vicky Soboleff was kind enough to help me brush up on my cedar weaving skills. So it's good time for those kind of activities.
Well, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I've heard about the Anchorage summer that hasn't happened. Yeah, well, my garden is doing well. Thank goodness. We've had a
It looks beautiful.
Yeah, we had a cold beginning of the summer, but it's been nice since pretty much when July rolled over, and still been nice. It's pretty nice today still.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get going on our agenda now that we're all introduced. Just an outline of what we will cover today. We're going to do a recap of the July board meeting. We'll look back at the annual meeting that happened in late June, and we will answer questions. We also have an event survey we hope you can participate in. Those of you who are participating today, if you view today's program and complete the short survey, you will be entered to win a door prize. We're giving away 2 $100 Barnacle Seafoods gift cards. And if you haven't tried the Barnacle Seafoods products, you really should. My daughter is just in love with them. Or both of my daughters that are here at my house are in love with those foods. So hopefully, if you win, hopefully you can try some of the great stuff that they make. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, or our first speaker rather, Director Nicole Hollingstad. She serves as a Governance and Nominations Committee Chair. Nicole, along with Kailjus, will offer a recap of the board's recent actions. But we'll start with Nicole. So Nicole, you're on.
Thank you so much, Jody. Ganesh Chish. Well, at every one of our board meetings, we have a variety of discussion and actions that take place. And so July was no exception with our full board and our committee meetings. And all of Sealaska's efforts and actions are driven by our mission, Sealaska's mission to strengthen people, culture, and our traditional homelands. It's nice to have that mission very firmly, in our minds as we move through our decisions. And our actions are also driven by our own shareholders' voices. Shareholders, you know that we had a very broad survey recently that allowed us to capture a lot of your thoughts and opinions. And shareholders have told us through instruments like that, and particularly in this latest one, that advocating for Native rights is the priority. So I'll give you some quick updates on some of our advocacy work. So I'm always very excited to give a policy update on our landless efforts. We have 5 landless communities: Haines, Teneke, Wrangell, Petersburg, and Ketchikan. And as I mentioned, I'm born and raised from Petersburg, so I'm a landless shareholder myself. And I'm going to take this opportunity to quickly address a question that Tammy San Gregory put in the chat, asking, how do we know if we're a landless shareholder? Well, the people who enrolled through those 5 communities to Sealaska, Teneke, Haines, Petersburg, Wrangell, and Ketchikan, if you own or have inherited any shares from family members that are connected to that community, those are landless shares. And I encourage you to call Sealaska. You can talk to somebody in records to confirm that. But it is, important to know the communities that your shares are connected to. Now, one of the driving factors in getting federal legislation passed is that about a quarter of our original shareholders were from those 5 communities in that landless category. There were about 4,400 shareholders at that time. So, significant part of our population. And now we're pushing in this new Congress, and Congress runs in 2-year sessions. So we have 2023 and 2024. There's been a reintroduction in both the House and the Senate of by our Alaska delegation of our landless legislation. We have been joined in the House. Representative Mary Peltola introduced our legislation. She is a Democrat, but she was joined by a Republican co-sponsor, Representative Pete Stauber of Minnesota. So that's wonderful. That makes it a bipartisan piece of legislation. And we've got House and Senate numbers to that legislation that you can find at www.withoutland.org. Isn't that funny? I still say the www. I don't think you need to anymore. Juice is laughing at Granny Nicole. So withoutland.org, you can always find great information. I was really pleased. Some of our recent activities included a group of advocates and representatives from Landless traveling out to DC in July. And it was worth every degree of 103 degree temperature to have the chance to have meetings on the Hill. We are doing that active advocacy in DC. There are ongoing meetings with those 5 communities, particularly in Teneke, Cake, and then in the Hoonah area, just to make sure that land selections are being considered through the lens of other communities that are affected. So, for instance, Teneke made some recommendations that went through considerable review by our senator, and the language of the bill and the current maps as they stand for land selections, those are all available to shareholders for review on withoutland.org. So great progress on Landless. We've got this session again from 2023 through the end of 24, where we've got fantastic momentum. So I'd like to go to the second bullet here, and that is policy update on the Farm Bill in 2023 in particular. And sometimes you wonder, what is Sealaska advocating for? How do they pick the priorities that are important? Anything that deals with access to our traditional foods, to food security, to access to our lands is a high priority, and the Farm Bill falls into that category. We continue to monitor for opportunities that ensure funding for ANCs and for Alaska tribes, anything that will help promote co-management of our resources, potentially increased contracting opportunities, grants for energy. Example, Jody, I know that's near and dear to your heart. So the Farm Bill is legislation that is renewed every 5 years, and it includes some vital programs that affect our rural communities: rural housing, community facilities, utility development, forestry management programs, even the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is within the Farm Bill. And we were finally able to introduce indigenous foods into schools for our youth through the Farm Bill, through that SNAP program. And in July of 2023, Senator Murkowski did introduce the Arctic Act, and our bills always stand for something. So it's the Improving Agriculture, Research, Cultivation, Timber, and Indigenous Commodities Arctic Act. And this legislation will strengthen a variety of the Farm Bill provisions to better address our needs in Alaska. So we thank our delegation. Sealaska is always aware and mindful of where there are opportunities for our shareholders in potential economic and community development. So we keep our eyes on pieces of policy that move through the process. And then my final part here is just to give our shareholders a small land management update. As we all know, our connection to place as Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people, it's our identity. Ha'ani in Tlingit, that's our lands. And Sealaska and our board of directors continue to advance opportunities for a richer, more meaningful way to connect to our traditional lands. We look for opportunities to put our land to work for shareholders and those communities. So, 2 things here. Want to talk just a tiny bit to our shareholders about Sealaska's 100-year vision. We are looking that far out to how the traditional lands of Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people of Southeast can continue to be accessible, to be healthy, to be thriving. And we envision a future where our grandchildren will have the chance to place their feet in the places where their ancestors once did and where their parents still do. We are still here. These are the lands upon which we live. So we will always care for the 365,000 acres that Sea Alaska owns through ANCSA. And remember, we used to roam through 23 million acres of what is now the Tongass National Forest. And our current ownership through Sea Alaska is 1.6% of those traditional homelands. 1.6%. When it comes to the landless, the additional land that is entitled to them under ANCSA, as it was to all of our more than 200 communities, that's less than 0.5% of the Tongass. So great progress on all of these fronts. We do continue to look and find opportunities to ensure a better future for the planet and for our people. And we believe that that is absolutely within reach. But we know, because we've been doing it for thousands of years, that we all have to do our part. So I'd like to close my part here with these words from Sea Alaska President and CEO Anthony Malott. He offered these words at the global launch of the Moana Luakea on June 15th. So after this short video, Ka'iljuss will then provide additional updates from the July committee and board meetings. Ganesh Chish.
We've been dancing around the subject of climate change and not saying it straight out. Global warming was first introduced as a concept in 1975, almost 50 years ago. 2023, the world says, let's go over 100 million barrels of oil a day for the very first time in our existence. That's our response. That's the Western world's response to climate change. We didn't do this, indigenous people, but we're the ones feeling it. My brother may lose his livelihood. There's no king salmon opening this year. It's because of a legal suit, but it's really because of climate change. There's people moving out of our villages because of this. The fish wheels on the Yukon River are high and dry. They're not turning. There's no nets in the water this summer. That's not leadership from our governments and the people in charge.
Oh man, I was there when Anthony gave that speech and it was so profound. It brought tears to my eyes. And yes, all of us must do our part, as you said, Chuck Claw. And that's why at IPEC it's so important that we've been working so hard on reducing the diesel that we burn in our small communities by building small hydro projects. But next, I'd like to ask Ka'iljuss to join us and offer a few more highlights from the July board and committee meetings. Ka'iljuss.
Oh, how Jody. Thank you. I just also want to add that it's a very transformational time. I think that COVID has brought us the ability to move with the changes. And at Sea Alaska, I'm very proud that my fellow directors are very supportive of that. We remind ourselves gently that we have to make a profit. We have to. A lot of us have business degrees, minors in business. We got to do that. So with that, in the July board meeting, the dollars and the conversations are very in depth about what we are going to do with that money. And so we support and continue to support throughout Southeast Alaska the need to develop new advanced speakers of our language. And Sea Alaska is, as the board of directors is, committed to making that happen. There's an informal and formal group that follows this plan, Sea Alaska's plan, which really is to promote language revitalization. It's a broader community we're listening to. And what they tell us is this: There's a need for intensive immersion. That is number one. I can tell you that right now. Hallelujah, number one. Number two is elder slash family support. That's another intensive role that's unidentified often. Number three, a healing uniting framework, which some practice, some don't, and we need to learn more about that. And funding urgency, because there's many opportunities that are sliding by us that are unfunded, and a dedicated language space. Those are the top five. So the board took action in July, and the following I'll just briefly summarize. There was support was provided for attendance at doing and being in the language practicing immersion workshop in Albuquerque, New Mexico. There was $3,500 allocated. There was another teacher immersion camp that was given $10,000. The camp gave language teachers much needed time to dedicate themselves towards just language acquisition and curriculum development. There was a third project coming from, it'll come out of the Ketchikan area. It's the Hudkill healing ceremony, and there was $25,000 allocated to that, with two major inputs was to unite the community in language efforts and to inspire healing for other language communities, or for all language communities. My granddaughter's peeking at me. Anyway, in closing out on this, just is a reaffirmation of our strong support for language, which the board, I was gently reminded, we always stay mindful to making that profit. And we have to do that for scholarships and language. I just had to say that. But if you want to learn more about this, I asked to please have available Tasha. Tasha's our language champion. She's getting everything organized at Sealaska and making things really whip around. I'm just so proud of her. And that's available in the chat. So with that, that's just a review. And like I said, we're all trying our very best, especially thinking about our new shareholders. How do we engage you in what we're doing? How do we share this information? And so far, I just love to thank my co-directors for being so informative. Right now, I'd like to introduce you to the shareholder, Sealaska Shareholder Relation Committee Chair, Barbara Cariente Nelson. She's going to offer an overview of the annual meeting.
Ganesh Eljus, and thank you for that report. I wanted to start out by saying that in the month of May, the directors, staff, and officers visited 11 communities throughout Southeast and down the West Coast, and we were warmly welcomed. It was very enriching for us. But that time is so precious to us because we are able to engage face to face. And during that month of May, we held 4 virtual meetings and sent out a survey with 356 respondents. So back to the community meetings, what really stood out in my mind is an elder in Kuna said, how are we going to connect our young and new shareholders to know who you as directors are in your leadership? How do we do that? Another question in Anchorage was from a young woman, middle-aged, and through tearful eyes, she asked us, please take care of the salmon people, take care of the tree people. And that, just even repeating that just really moves me, because there's a collective oneness about us, a responsibility and an understanding what was given to us, what we inherited through our DNA to take care of the ocean and the earth for generations to come. We want to take this time to thank shareholders for joining us at the annual meeting. We traveled to the traditional lands of the Tlahuac and Klawock, and over 300 shareholders attended in person. And nearly 1,500 joined through the live webcast. We were so pleased with that. The official business at the annual meeting, as is every annual meeting, was the election, and 4 seats were open, and the following were reelected by shareholders: Kagak Ting, Morgan Howard, Kail Lisa Lang, Sadhu, Angela Michaud, and Ganak Shah, Karen Togg. 3 other independents ran as well: Monica Ortiz, Patrick Anderson, and Charles Skolka. Approximately 67% of eligible shareholders voted their proxy, compared to 61% last year. And I believe we even hit quorum earlier than we normally do. What this really speaks to us as directors is that our shareholders understand their responsibility and their charge to be engaged with this corporation, their corporation, and be part of the voice and the vision that we are collectively trying to achieve. And so we hear your voices through your voting. Our CEO, Anthony Malott, gave a business update, and we heard from him that we expanded into Norway with our investments in Marine. And in 2022, we strengthened the New England Seafoods access to resources with our investment in IceMar and AG Seafoods. And we now own 100% of Greg Drilling and invested in Causeway Geotech. Our government service businesses had a record year, and so we have much to celebrate as we expanded beyond our U.S. markets and into the UK, Iceland, and Northern Ireland. Our business income increased between 2021 and 2022, despite the economic challenges that we had, and this helped offset the large change in Sealaska investment income from 2021 to 2022. So as Sealaska operations revenue and income grows, Sealaska is reliant on our investments in 7i income and creating an ever stronger financial base to build and rely on into the future. It was reported how Sealaska is advancing its goals of addressing climate change and updates, as you heard in the piece that we shared with you from our CEO. And so one of the things that really touched me as I listened to even the broadcast and listened to my fellow directors here today is that, and this really is a charge for us women, not only the directors, but those of our shareholders, that we need strong women voices about climate change. And we feel it. I mean, look at me, my iPad melted down just from the heat that I'm in. During the meeting, we announced the incoming board youth advisor, Najia Braylon Martin. Braylon will serve a 2-year term. She completed a Master of Arts in Public Humanities at Brown University, and she's currently pursuing a doctorate in Ethnic Studies at the University of California in Berkeley. She holds a bachelor's in Religion and Anthropology with a minor in Dance and Movement Studies from Emory University, and she's currently pursuing certification in Tlingit from the University of Alaska Southeast. Braylon aspires to teach resilience, hope, and the power of connection in post-secondary education through centering Tlingit wisdom and perspectives and future. She takes much pride in her Tlingit heritage. She will serve over the next year alongside our past board youth advisor, Connor Ulmer. Connor inspired the board to add a second BOA position so that each BOA will serve in a staggered 2-year term. Toward the end of I think it was toward the middle of our annual meeting, the Tlawakinya dancers welcomed us in the Tlawak traditional lands. Their performance resonated with everybody, and we thank them again for asking us to join them to dance. They stole the show. Their spirit was grand and was magnified, and we felt it, and it helped ground us as we gathered. Eva Rowan, the dance group leader, mentioned to us recently that because of the live webcast, the group has been invited to a university down south to perform for them. During our July meeting, we met 35 of our interns. That's the highest number of interns that Sealaska has had with our partners throughout our area. And we also moved to appoint 3 new board youth advisors to the Shareholder Participation Committee. And I'm going to let this one out of the bag. I don't know that it's come out in any of our releases yet, but the board also discussed where our next annual meeting is going to be. We usually announce that at the annual meeting, but we had so much going on that we didn't get the opportunity to. So the board voted in July that our next annual meeting will be in Sitka, Alaska. We also had a great conversation about our role in Land Back. We know that we are charged with maintaining our connection of people to place. That is where we exercise our sovereignty. That is where we enforce our understanding of our responsibility and who we are as Native people. And I just want to thank all of you again for taking this time to tune in and for the privilege that you've given us to serve you as directors And with that, I'd like to ask Director Hellingstad to help with the next portion of our agenda, the question and answers. Ganesh Chish.
Ganesh Chish, Barbara. Thank you so much for more details on what was just a phenomenal annual meeting in Klawock this year, and a wonderful chance to be back on Prince of Wales in those communities for the first time since before COVID. So at this point, we would love to turn to the question and answer portion of this lunchtime session. And this is fantastic. This is, why we're here, for you to gain some information and then be able to ask your questions. And I'll be sure to ask the support and help of my co-directors here. So we have a few questions that did come in during the hour, and we've got all of our directors who can turn their cameras on with their screens on. So we've got a few questions about the land list, and I can answer a few of them, but I would also ask Seth Thin, our very knowledgeable co-director, one of them as well. So the first question came in from Charles Skulka Jr., and he was asking about the difference between the landless shareholders who were enrolled to those 5 communities. Those communities are listed as urban corporation communities within Sealaska's enrollment. So those 5 urban communities and the shareholders that enrolled through them, those are the landless shareholders: Teneke, Haines, Petersburg, Ketchikan, and Wrangell. Charles, you made the very good point that Sealaska also has at-large shareholders, and those shareholders were those who enrolled who were living out of state, essentially, when the enrollment was happening through BIA for ANCSA. And at-large shareholders, because they didn't necessarily tie themselves to a community, they carry a certain type of stock at Sealaska, at-large shares. Those at-large shares, Charles, because you're not tied to a community, those at-large shares do get the benefits of ANCSA 7I payments. As we know, village shareholders have those payments sent through to the village corporations. So it's a good distinction to know about. The landless shareholders who are enrolled as urban, but they don't have a corporation yet, and at-large shareholders who are enrolled through Sealaska, but only have those Sealaska shares. So Charles, thank you for bringing up that difference. And I hope that even discussing it here helps folks understand that. So Jody, I'll ask this question for you. Sherry Lee asked in the chat, what impact will any action on landless have for Alaska Native people who live out of state?
Oh, well, that's a really good question, and thank you for that. Any shareholder, no matter where they live, is eligible for scholarships to go to school, and it's not just for college; it's also for vocational. They're also eligible for dividends, internships. Just really promoting our scholarship and internship program. I am a former scholarship recipient and a former intern back at the very beginning of the intern program. And it's a very competitive, but very valuable part of what Sealaska does for our shareholders, and especially our youth. So it's really critical, and it's always been very important for Sealaska for us to support the landless. We don't like that word, but that's kind of, it does explain really well what that means. And from my perspective, if you think about the 5 landless communities, Teneke, Haines, Ketchikan, Wrangell, and Petersburg, what do they all have in common? And what I see is that they had a lot of non-native residents at the time ANCSA passed. And I just wonder if that is no accident that those 5 communities were left out. And, you know, and that just makes me a little angry, really, that happened, because it's inexplicable. Nobody knows exactly why those communities were left out, because they should not have been. But I'm just a little suspicious about that. But anyway, I think it's really important that we support those 5 communities and getting their land. So I think I probably more than answered the question or said too much, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
No, that's okay. It's all really good information. We get asked all the time why these 5 communities were left out, and there's no congressional record that explains why. We can speculate, and we've spoken with people who were in and around those rooms. We do know that there were heavy timber interests in the region around those 5 communities that might have prevented them from getting their own parcels of land. But here we are now, 50 years later, more than 50, still fighting for that benefit and that long lost opportunity for these 5 communities. So Maxine Reichert and Kevin Sodders both asked about the timeline on our landless bills and wondering about the chances of passage. Maxine Reichert is Sealaska's former corporate secretary. She served with distinction for many, many years, and many of our shareholders know her and recognize that name. Hi, Maxine. It's always great to see you. She, decades ago, was fighting this landless fight. So I can say, over time, this is the 7th time our landless bill has been introduced in Congress. When you remember that each session of Congress is 2 years, this is the 15th year that we have gone back time and again to talk to our delegation. What has changed in recent years are the conversations that we've been having with our communities. Because we published maps of land selection, and we're always very careful about not trying to openly identify sacred and cultural places that are important to our people. But because we published our maps, that then allowed us to have really good conversations with communities. We have reinforced the public access language in our legislation to assure there's still recreational access to these lands. We have moved selections to take, for example, a U.S. Forest Service cabin that was in one community's selection. We took it out and changed the little parcel to make sure that we were keeping those opportunities whole around the community. We've done a lot of compromising, collaborating, communicating, working with different organizations to gain support. So the short answer is this, Maxine and Kevin, we are standing in the best position we ever have for support and potential passage of our landless bill, potentially by the end of 24. So when we say to shareholders, please go to withoutland.org. There's a link at the bottom where you can simply click a link, add your email to say, yes, I support this effort. I know that we come back and ask that often, but it's because we have to keep going back. And when we can show that support from shareholders through that link on Without Land at the bottom when you scroll down, it's very helpful for us. So thank you for all of those great landless questions. And please forgive me if I'm glancing down or if I'm glancing off to the side. I'm monitoring questions as they come in and want to make sure that we can get to them. So we do have another question that asks, is Sealaska actively trying to contact shareholders for the vacancies that we post? And Michael Starr also pointed to those jobs, saying that, you know, sometimes there are folks who are no longer new to the workforce, and we completely understand that. So I'm going to ask Iljuice if she'll answer that question that came in from our shareholders.
We had thank you, Nicole. We had a really great discussion yesterday in preparing for this meeting. And, you know, there's so much going on that oftentimes we are asking the same questions and wanting to know to give the answers. And that question came up, and there was a registration requirement, but once you register to try to get your job with Sealaska, there's a link that gives you every job notice that comes in. And I had asked yesterday to try to have that available for in the chat or to share with shareholders. And there is Sealaska serves through committees, and part of these actions of the committees are concerns like shareholder hire, and it has been on the radar for many of us. And I would say in our strategic planning, which we come into September, that is going to be huge on the radar. That not only are we aware of it, but what do we do to make sure that we're making it a priority, and that we are in fact listening to what you're saying, whether you're new to the employment scene or whether you're very seasoned in it. We're working to try to connect that and make it a better experience for our shareholders. And that's going to be, I believe, to be quite frank, some trial and error, but we're going to work on it. We're going to continue to make it better. And the number one thing I believe is having that message in our ears, and that we as active committee members, there's very, very engaged committee members that will work with management and work with each other to make sure it becomes a priority that gets answered. And that the question is great, because it's time right now to have it on the table as a priority for how we move forward in providing you through shareholder services a better service. So thank you for the question. Thanks, Nicole.
Absolutely. Thank our shareholders for the great questions that are being placed in chat. And, you mentioned opportunities for shareholder development through some of the positions that are posted at Sealaska. Another way that we develop shareholders is through our scholarship program. And Barbara, if you can still hear me and you're still connected, we do have a scholarship question that I'm hoping you might be able to talk to. The question is simply from Marissa, asking about consideration of either more flexibility or an open or rolling deadline for scholarships, rather than the very the strict one time a year eligibility deadline. And I'm wondering if there's anything you'd care to say about any discussions that might have been had on that.
I love that question, particularly when there are 6 of your directors who will be meeting as trustees for Sealaska Heritage Institute in the next 2 weeks. And no, as of today, there isn't such a rolling program, but it's an excellent question for us to consider during our next meeting, because I get it. It's difficult. I think what we're very much proud of is the change that we made to include part-time students into the process of receiving scholarships. But just know it'll become a discussion item at our next DOT meeting. Thank you for that question.
Excellent. Well, good. Thank you, Barbara. For our shareholders who are listening, there are Sealaska directors who do sit on the board of the Sealaska Heritage Institute, on their board of trustees. And so we do have many cross conversations about the administration of that scholarship program through SHI. So Marissa, thanks so much for asking that question. So there's a question from Jeanette, and this comes up often about ancestry. So I'll see if anybody wants to take a stab at the answer. But the question is, where would you direct people if they want to find out their ancestors' houses? Just more of the cultural history of their family. Kiljuice, I'm wondering if you might have some advice.
Yeah, there's a couple ways. I know for the Haida side, you can go back to Skidegate and they keep the rolls. They have the actual rolls. You can go and look. You can ask to pull them if you're of descendancy. find, you can, it goes back to Skaljat, our woman, foam woman, our creator on the Raven side, and then on the Eagle side as well. So that's one very valuable way. But you know, a lot of times you have to start getting to know people who do the research work. For the Haidas, it's Rob Yates. And I know that individual, I can't speak for the Simsian side of it is another side that I'd really like to learn more about. So you're not alone in your question, because many of us share shared heritages. And I would go ahead and make a request, because then I can get narrowed down to who your family is, because that will sort us into what direction to move. And then it's word of mouth. A lot of it is word of mouth, and then connecting you up. And our board of directors is amazing as far as doing their cultural homework. So I'd have to know a little about who the family is, where did you come from, your village of origin, and that kind of starts to set your path. And it's exciting and it's fun to find out. And actually it's life-changing sometimes, because then you're entitled to things like your clan name, your clan songs, your properties. So thank you for that question, Nicole. I think we might be able to get a resource list for that, because that question has come up before in actual meetings, but we directed them directly to people based on the information they gave us. So yeah, we can get a little more organized on that, but I'm sure that we'll send me your name, your family, and we'll do the best that we can just right now today.
Thank you, Kale Juice. And then for our final question of the day, I'll toss this over to Jody Mitchell. We have another question about Sealaska's investments in both Norway and the UK, and just wondering if just very briefly we could speak to those investments. And there was a question if we have investments in any other countries at the time. I do know that we have some government services contracts in places like Kazakhstan. We do security work in foreign ports to try to keep those facilities safe. But Jody, if you want to talk a little more about our Nessie Seafoods business, and then we'll close her out.
Yeah. Well, the New England Seafoods Company is located in the UK, in Great Britain. I know they have at least 2 locations. One is in London proper, and one is in Grimsby. Grimsby is undergoing an expansion right now, so that they can process more whitefish. And the Eismar company we're helping them with getting channels to market. And, you know, it's really exciting that we are really becoming a very well-known leader in the seafood industry, not just in the US, but also abroad. And people are, at first probably just kind of looked at us like, oh, a new entrant. But now we're very well respected. And when Sealaska invests in something, in the past, way in the past, we really weren't doing it right. And I just really have to give kudos to our Chief Operating Officer, Terry Downs. Because I remember when we first hired him, he came to us and he said, when you want to find a company to invest in, you don't go to the bank and look for a new investment. Those are all investments that nobody else wanted. And that's why they went to a bank. You have to find places that find partners where you have synergies in common. And so that is the approach that Terry has taken. And these companies are not for sale. None of them are ever for sale, but Terry is able to find a way that we can make the company better by our investment in the company. And that has been a very successful and way for us to make money, which is so very critical for us because of, if we don't make money, which is Sealaska really is our main objective, we can't support all of these other programs for shareholders, the internships, the scholarships, the dividends, the language program, you name it. All of those things require Sealaska to be financially successful. And so that's something that that we're very focused on. But I want to talk about one investment that we recently were selected for. It's in Italy. We are going to be doing an offshore wind program. And it's very, very exciting because Sealaska invested in a company, Greg Marine, where they do deep sea drilling. Well, Sealaska is in a very fortunate position to be one of, if not the only company that can do these deep sea drilling projects that can, and that's really why we were selected for this project in Italy. And as you probably know, the shareholders, I'm sure everybody has heard that offshore wind is a big deal nowadays. There's a lot of people doing it. There's a lot of projects I read about on the East Coast that are coming and are being worked on. And so Sealaska is definitely going to be a leader in this sector, and especially if this first project goes well. And another thing that's really exciting about this is because we are one of the only companies that can do this, our profit margin for these projects is going to be around 50%. And a profit margin, in case I want to make it simple. Basically, that's your revenue minus your expenses. If it's 50%, that means that half of what you get from your revenue is actually floats to your bottom line. So that's really important for us. And hopefully we can keep that niche and expand it for the future. And I'd really like that sometime we could do those projects here in our homelands. We don't have a lot of wind here, but we do definitely offshore. So hopefully someday that will be part of what we do. Anyway, I could go on and on. Renewable energy is really part of my, my passion. But I will stop there. Thank you for that question.
It was a great question and a great chance to learn more about some of Sealaska's very important holdings and the work they do. So we're a little bit past the top of the hour. And Jody, I understand you'll be closing out our session together. So I'll just turn quickly if K'iljuis or Director Karianti Nelson just want to say a quick goodbye while their mics are open. We sure appreciate all of our shareholders for joining us.
I'd like to thank my co-directors for having a great conversation and hope that we build a relationship with our new shareholders and continue working and improving on providing information. And thank you everybody for being here today. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, I will close us out. Sorry, Barbara, go ahead.
I just wanted to say again and underscore it that we're 25,000 strong, and we have a position from the north to hold up our end of the corner of the blanket globally to address global warming. And I'm just so proud of who we are as a people, that we're so connected to our waters and our land, and we're in a critical place to address it. So thank you all for attending. Ganesh Chish.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, I'm sorry we're going over time. I hope we still have people following us. But I just wanted to remind you, shareholders, if you complete the survey, which is in the chat, you are eligible to win one of two prizes of $100 cash each. And 1 week from today, please join Sealaska for an update from the Shareholder Participation Committee, or we also call the SPC. This event will be held Tuesday, August 15th from 12 to 1 p.m. Alaska time. And you can view that on myseaalaska.com. And also, please join the board later this year for our Q4 board Q&A. And when that comes up and we schedule it, we will announce that and through email and on myseaalaska.com. Sealaska is asking shareholders to bring core native values to life during the 2023 Pound Sealaska Way of Life photo contest. The 2023 photo contest has 4 categories. 1, our land. 2, our past, present, and future, sorry. 3, our strength and leadership. And 4, balance, reciprocity, and respect. And on the screen, you can see Hashuka. I mean, they're in all of the languages, Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian. So anyway, enjoy that because it's really pretty pictures there. The submissions, so please submit a photo if you can, and submissions will be accepted through Friday, August 11th. That's coming up. That's this Friday. So please do that if you have something you want to share. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you at the next one. Gunachish Hawa Toikson Newsom.